Hello and welcome back to the channel. My name is Dan and I'm here to bring you another FPL video. In this one we're going to be looking at my Game Week 21 transfer targets, where I list a couple of players that I think we should be considering bringing into our teams. I break down all their statistics and their transfers in total so far this week. Of course, we are still mid Game Week 20, so at time of recording, which means that potentially there are some double Game Week announcements that may come our way ahead of the Game Week 21 deadline, and of course maybe even possibilities of course blank Game Weeks as well. So do take of course what I'm offering you here with a bit of a pinch of salt, because we could get some more news after I've recorded it, but these are definitely my top targets for this week. Of course, if you're new to the channel and you do enjoy the content, guys, smash that subscribe button for me. We're well on our way now to that 600 subscriber goal for the end of January. So let's have a look first of all who's number one on the list. Now it's this man Martin Odegaard. Now it's somebody that I brought in on my wild card for the World Cup. To be honest, it was a very close call between him, Martinelli and Almiron. And just essentially, you know, by a throw of the dice, I've just made it on the better side of those three picks, essentially, with him. And again, after watching the North London derby, I must admit that I think he is definitely almost an essential part of that midfield now for us. I think that with Arsenal in the form that they're in, with the fact that they're looking like absolute title contenders, if not title winners this season, I think this man again is at the forefront of everything that they construct through the midfield. He's in the right positions now, much more advanced than he was last season, and I think he's just found his footing in this Arsenal team after, of course, that purchase from Real Madrid. So I think he's an absolute fantastic asset. Of course, his statistics are pretty average overall. I mean, in terms of a midfielder, his XG per 90 0.27 and XA per 90 of 0.37. It's not absolutely magnificent by any stretch in terms of his goal involvement, but he's still managed to get 8 goals and 5 assists, which is, again, a fantastic return, really, for that price point. Even at 6.8 now that he's risen to, I just think he is well worth taking into our squads. Of course, he does play Manchester United at home in Game Week 21, which I do think is going to be a bit of a test for both teams. It could be very, very tricky. Of course, United do have a midweek fixture as well against Palace, which Arsenal don't obviously have. So they'll be a little bit more rested than Manchester United, even though I believe United may sort of swap up a few of their starting 11 against Palace. We'll see how Ten Hag sets up, but yeah, I think it's going to be a very, very tough game to call again. I think Arsenal may edge it though, because it's the home fixture. And to be honest with you, when you're looking at fixtures like this, attackers are never a bad shout, right? Defenders tend to be the ones that you try to avoid, just because you feel like, you know, there could potentially be a lot of goals in it. So I think Odegaard is more than capable of doing some damage against United, and then of course his run beyond that, of course most notably doubling in Game Week 23 against Brentford and Manchester City, both home matches. Of course that City game is going to be absolutely electric, I believe, just because of course by that point Arsenal may still be 5 or 8 points ahead in the league. So if that is the case, then that is, I think, going to be deciding the title. If Arsenal come away with 3 points from that match, they would potentially be up to about 11 points clear if they won, obviously, all their other fixtures around that time. So I think that's definitely going to be an explosive fixture, but again, one that I would back Odegaard to potentially do something in. Of course, then another notable part of these fixtures on screen here is Game Week 25. Arsenal don't have any cup fixtures that essentially could mean they will blank in Game Week 25. So bringing in an Arsenal asset now is not only short term, it is of course long term, covering both a double and of course that potential blank game week for certain individuals. So I personally feel like he has to be number one on this list. I think Saka and Martinelli are still very, very good options in the midfield for Arsenal. It's just Saka's price point, of course, at 8.1. It's so difficult to justify that price when you have a 6.8 million midfielder in the same team that's offering so much more in terms of output. And then, of course, Martinelli's just fallen off that little bit in comparison to where he was first at when the season first started. So I just think he pips it for me ahead of those two, which is why he makes number one on the list. Then moving into the second pick for me here, it is this man, Ivan Toney. Now, I will caveat this with there is not enough solid information out there yet to be able to confirm or deny that he is essentially going to be getting either banned or some kind of suspension based on the betting situation for him, right? So, you know, it's a difficult one to call, but I still feel like even short to long term, Brentford are looking like a very, very good team and very, very good outfit. They're a bit of a monster at home. Really, their home form is very, very good. And I feel like really when you've got a penalty taker as good as Ivan Toney, and of course as well as that, look at his XG per 90 of 0.82. It's nearly, the expectancy is basically 1 goal per game nearly, right? It's very, very solid. And at 7.5 million, I think he could just be the sort of Mitrovic replacement, or, say Wilson potentially gets rotated now that Isak is back. That type of area, maybe, or even a Martial, of course, with his injury concerns, maybe you do go for Ivan Toney. So I like him as an option. I think his price point is very easy to get for most managers if you're on that 3-4-3 formation. And of course, like I say, I just think his statistics overall back up his choice, really. Of course, only 23% owned as well still across the game. I don't necessarily feel like he can kind of be put into differential territory, right? But we've just seen him score 9 points. And I think that 100% penalty record is exactly the type of thing that I would be looking at in terms of a stat, right? If I was in the market for a forward in the game. So I definitely feel like he has to make the second choice. Then, of course, moving into our third option here is this man of the moment in the team of the moment, to be honest. I mean, Brighton are looking like absolute monsters since the restart, right? I don't know what De Zerbi's been able to do in that time. Of course, some of Brighton's players were missing. McAllister, of course, being one of the World Cup winners. But essentially, March is just absolutely on fire, right? At 5.1 million now. He's only 2.5% owned, so I could have put him in as the differential of the week this week, but I think a lot of people are going to be jumping on Brighton sooner rather than later. Of course, his fixtures are absolutely fantastic. The point of concern about bringing him in for this week, though, and any other Brighton assets, of course, is that potential to blank in game week 25. The bookies basically have odds on that Newcastle and Manchester United are probably going to be playing in the League Cup final, which would mean that Brighton would have a blank in game week 25 against Newcastle. So it's a little bit of a risk to go with a Brighton asset this early, even though, of course, those fixtures and that fixture run looks absolutely fantastic. I think we're better placed really to wait until we see some of the cup fixtures domestically before we make the move. So it potentially means we miss, of course, the Leicester fixture. We may even miss him against Bournemouth, which would be a shame because that is a real target fixture. Of course, Palace being a derby, and of course Fulham at home. Although Fulham, I would say, are definitely a very, very structured and formidable team. Only losing 1-0 to Newcastle at the weekend, they definitely look like a team that deserve really that kind of top half table position that they're currently in. I think Brighton at the Amex though are just a little bit of a different level, so I feel like they're going to cause Fulham problems. So again, those 4 fixtures ahead of that Newcastle fixture are very, very promising. I think my recommendation here would be that if you're able to field 11 players in 25, even with bringing March in, then I would look at possibly doing it. He could be an Almiron replacement. I don't know how many other budget midfielders some people have. Of course, Bailey, I think, is still owned by some individuals, but he's just come on the back of a 12-point haul, so I don't necessarily see him possibly being sold. If you've got a little bit more team value, maybe you look at moving Andreas Pereira rather than being that 5th midfielder as a cheap budget option. You just find that extra $500,000 to be able to reach to Solly March. And of course, him being able to be benched in game week 25 should Newcastle make the final would definitely be a possible play as well. So just one to watch. That's why he's kind of in the medium level of somebody in the watch list, essentially, because I don't think he's an absolute go out and must buy this week, but he's certainly one that we need to track and monitor and possibly future plan for alongside other Brighton assets as well. Then moving into the 4th option here before we move on to the differential of the week, it is this man, Rodrigo. So I feel like he's a little bit unfortunate to have not got returns over the past couple of weeks. He's been very, very close. Of course, he did get one return, I should say, against West Ham. It's just we could have seen a potential double-digit haul should have Fabianski not saved that last dying minutes chance that Rodrigo had. It was an absolute phenomenal save, so I would definitely recommend watching the highlights of that game just to see what this man can do. Like, he's still playing as an out-of-position midfielder. It is worth noting that Leeds, of course, with the transfer market, they are in the market for a forward. Of course, we do have the return of Patrick Bamford, where we would see Rodrigo probably drop a little bit deeper, in which case his involvement may be a little bit of a drop-off. So he's someone that I would say is more maybe short-term and definitely one to watch based on activity for Leeds in the transfer market and based on Bamford's return. So I think at the moment he provides great value at 6.4 million as an out of position midfielder playing in that number 9 role for Leeds, but he's definitely someone that we need to keep an eye on in terms of those positions and yeah, just essentially what Leeds will do as a team. That being said, though, I do really like their fixtures, and of course they do have a potential double game week coming up as well. We will know more once we see the result, of course, against Cardiff that they will play in the midweek. So it's still yet to be determined. Again, I will caveat this whole video with the fact that all of these individuals may change based on some of the news we may get before the deadline. But I still wanted to put a few players in certain people's minds, or just you as managers, just to try and help think about who you should be moving for. And to be honest, as you can see, it's riddled really with midfield options. That seems to be, in my opinion, where most of the value is in the game at the moment. And of course, the most potential for returns as well. So great fixtures for Leeds, great fixtures for Rodrigo as an asset as well. And I think we could see just a few last hauls before potentially he moves back into that deeper midfield role. And then finally, we do have the differential of the week. As mentioned, this could have realistically been Solly March just because of the percentage on ownership. But I will again mention that I think that, you know, when you're looking at the value picks in midfield at the moment, there are just a plethora of them and so many different options. I think this man, James Ward-Prowse, is definitely it's time we start talking about him as an FPL asset. It's a bit of a shame because Southampton in open play aren't necessarily doing what essentially would benefit this man, because he's created 39 chances and 6 big chances so far in the season, but nobody's really got onto the end in terms of converting them. So he's only gained 2 assists, but in terms of his set piece threat and potential, he's scored 5 goals. Of course, you know, if you've seen the free kick potential of this man, then yeah, I think you would probably back him to score most 30-yard out free kicks, right? If you haven't seen any kind of reel or show reel of him, I just implore you to go and search YouTube for Ward-Prowse and what his finishing is like, because he's arguably one of the best free kick takers kind of in the world at the moment, to be honest. His absolute pinpoint accuracy, he just seems to hit the nail on the head every single time. And of course, Southampton's fixtures aren't really too challenging. There's a couple of interesting ones here towards the back end of the 5. Sorry. So the first 2, Villa at home, Brentford away, mid-table teams. Of course, Southampton are struggling with relegation at the moment, or in that relegation fight. So they really need to get as many points as possible. Villa, I think, can still leak goals. They are, of course, looking much improved under Unai Emery, but I still believe that Southampton could get a result there at home. Brentford away is a little bit trickier. I think that'll be a bit of a difficult result for them to achieve. But then from game week 23 onwards, we're looking at Wolves and Leeds as 2 of those games in those 3. And they are, of course, teams in and around that relegation zone that there's just going to be, I think, a little bit of fight from both of these teams. And I always, as mentioned with the situation with Arsenal and Manchester United with Odegaard, I feel like when you're looking at a fixture that feels like it's going to be a little bit feisty, or teams have got things to play for, you tend to back the attackers, right, over the defenders. So I can see the appeal with him. He's only £6.2 million. I can't fit him in really in terms of my squad at the moment. I could move Eriksen to him, for example, but I'm thinking that Eriksen probably in my squad specifically becomes a Brighton attacker if we get news of Newcastle, of course, not making that final. So I think, you know, keep your options open, essentially. Maybe a lot of people are going to go into this game week with rolling. I know, of course, game week 20 was very, very tempting for a lot of people to take hits for. I'm not as convinced that game week 21 is something that we need to be, you know, either sort of taking hits for, unless you've really got some kind of injury or suspension concerns. I feel like this is a potential week where we can kind of maybe assess some of these selections, wait and see for a little bit more information and some news of double game weeks before we make our moves. But I genuinely think that he needs to be considered. Like I say, even from game week 22 onwards, I feel like Wolves, Chelsea, Leeds, you know, they're not particularly difficult fixtures. I know I've highlighted Chelsea in pink there as an away fixture, but ultimately, you know, Graham Potter and Chelsea aren't really playing that consistently to sort of secure essentially a guaranteed win, right, for them. So I think he's an absolute prolific free kick taker. Maybe is something that we should be taking seriously as a bit of a kind of 3, maybe 4 week punt at some point. So that's why he makes the differential pick this week, guys. Well, anyway, I hope you enjoy the content, guys. As always, let me know in the comments below if you're thinking about any of these individuals showcased today, or if you feel like I've missed anybody. I hope your game week 20 is going well so far. I will be doing a team selection video at some point, probably Wednesday evening now, after the Manchester United and Palace game. I've got 3 assets playing in that evening, so maybe I'll just wait until the result of that comes in, and then ahead of the Spurs and City fixture, we'll be looking at my team selection and how I got on in game week 20. Yeah, and of course as well, guys, if you're new to the channel and you enjoy the content, smash that subscribe button to be notified of all future content. And of course, guys, finally, if you enjoy this content, smash that like button below. It'd be great if we could reach 50 likes. It's the easiest way to support the channel, and it only takes 2 seconds, right, to do. So I'd really appreciate that from you. And yeah, of course, I'll see you in another video very, very soon. And thanks for watching again, guys. Take care.